Spring practice begins this week for the Ducks, and their top priorities are on defense. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. If you have not already, please like, comment, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to or watch this show, which today is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Spring priorities, Tosh Lupoi and Dana Altman makes it clear he has no intention of going anywhere as Oregon's men's basketball coach, and they're the 4th seed in the Pac-12 tournament. But we start with spring football, which begins this week. Just a couple of practices for the Ducks. We'll see if anything notable comes out of it, and then Oregon will go on spring break, and then spring football will return. And before you know it, everybody, the spring game on April 27th will be here. And I think we're all excited to see more than a couple of things when that comes around. But for this particular set of practices, Oregon's top priorities are most definitely on defense. And I think the number one thing for the Ducks is figuring out their depth chart along the defensive line, because there are only about 17,000 different permutations. That's not the actual number, but there are a lot of different ways that this defensive line could look in 2024. You know for certain that Jamari Caldwell is going to be there. I don't think anybody else's spot is set in stone. That includes a returner like Keon Ware-Hudson, who's played for the Ducks for the last 4 or 5 years, a guy like Ben Roberts, who, has been a steady presence in the room, but is not necessarily the most high-level guy on the interior. You have a number of different options, whether it's guys from the 2023 class, like Amari Washington, or Mikhail Gardner, or Johnny Bowens, or Terrence Green, or you've got the 5-star Aiden Breland coming in. You've got Zadavian Sims, who they've got coming in. You've got Jericho Johnson coming in this 2024 cycle. I'm hard-pressed, other than Aiden Breland, to see any of the true freshmen on this interior defensive line class playing a big role this year. But someone from that 2023 cycle is going to pop. Yeah, and quite frankly, my number one guy, just based on how often we saw him last year in snap counts, would be Amari Washington. But honestly, your guess is as good as mine, because you know what's happened since then? An entire offseason, many months of being in the weight room and learning the playbook and relationships with coaches and everything like that has been changing over the last couple of months. And so going into spring football, I don't know that even Tony Tuioti, the defensive line coach, or Tosh Lupoi, or Dan Lanning, or anybody could give you a firm 2 deep along the defensive line. I think it could go any number which ways, because all those guys were roughly the same when it came to being rated coming out of high school as recruits. Again, aside from Aiden Breland, who I do expect to have a role as a true freshman, but how big of a role? Hard to say. If you told me by the middle of this year, Breland is starting at defensive tackle alongside Jamari Caldwell as your top 2 guys, yeah, I could see it. But what you have to remember with this particular position group is that Oregon is going to play, and everyone does this, it's not necessarily specific to the Ducks, they're going to play 5 or 6 defensive linemen. You've got goal line packages. You've got a lot of rotations in there. I mean, Oregon last season had Keon Ware-Hudson as one of the guys that was in the rotation, and the 4 guys in front of him are all gone. Brandon Dorlus, Taki Taimani, Casey Rogers, and Popo Amavai. Those were your top 4 defensive tackles. So if you put Caldwell in there, the Houston transfer who was all Big 12 second team, he's a surefire starter. No way you add somebody of that caliber in a room with this much flux and you don't play him right away. But everybody else, I think they're going to be fighting for. And I think that's great. I think that's great because you have a bunch of guys that are trying to establish themselves in college football, who are trying to prove to the coaching staff that, hey, I deserve this role and I'm better than this guy over here, even though he might be good as well. So that competition is going to be fierce. That's one of the priorities. Second priority is in the secondary. I think the linebackers for Oregon are fairly set. There could be a 4th spot that's a little bit of a wild card, But I think your top guys of certainly Jeffrey Bossa and Justin Jacobs, and then Devin Jackson will be kind of in that second group, and we'll see who fills the fourth spot. Maybe it's Jerry Mixon from the 2023 class. Maybe it's a freshman in 2024. I don't know. A lot of different ways that could go. And if you guys want to break down, let me know. And I'll get to every position group at some point on the show leading up to and kind of during spring football. But I think that the secondary has just got so many bodies. And the interesting thing about it is if there ever comes a two deep, like going into the spring game, for instance, it probably won't include Jaleel Florence, who is not expected to be back during spring football while he recovers from an injury, last that I had heard. So if he's not returning till the fall, you'll have all these guys that will have an opportunity to make an impression without Florence being there. Now, Florence was one of the top two corners for Oregon last year. So someone like a Cam Alexander, the UTSA transfer, would have to make a really, really big impression on this coaching staff for them to say, okay, he's even better than Jaleel Florence. It's not as if it hasn't happened before. If you go back to this past season, 2022 saw Triquez Bridges struggle in the first half and play really good football in the second half. And he wasn't a starter. He was a rotation guy, but he wasn't a starter. I've always been high on Jaleel Florence ever since he was recruited, and I saw him as a true freshman play on the field for the Ducks. I struggle to think that he's just going to get completely rotated out. It could depend, though, on how he responds from his injury. Because if he recovers and, isn't quite the same physically, well, then somebody else who is just a little bit healthier could have the opportunity to move ahead of him on the depth chart. But I think the corners, aside from Jabbar Muhammad, are also completely in flux. I think the safeties are pretty set at the top of the depth chart. I don't think the rotation guys are anywhere near established right now. I think your top safeties or nickel guys are Kobe Savage, the Kansas State transfer, Tysheem Johnson, back from last year, Pac-12 honorable mention, and Brandon Johnson, the transfer from Duke. Those are the three guys. So in a 4-2-5, I think those guys will be on the field when Oregon takes their first snap against Idaho on August 31st, and Jabbar Muhammad will be at one corner, and the other corner spot will probably be Jaleel Florence. Maybe. Lots of names in there. And so then you have to figure out, well, who are the next best guys? So that's what the staff has to figure out. I think those are the top priorities for Oregon in spring football, more so than anything else. Doesn't mean every group doesn't have something to look at or figure out or establish the depth chart or anything like that. I think the number one thing offensively that I'm most interested to see, and, media access, I won't be there covering it in person, but I'll certainly be as on top of covering the reports and talking to anybody I know that was there. Like if Max Torres ever gets to a practice, of course, I'm most interested to see what happens with the wide receiver room offensively. I think everything else is fairly set in stone. The running backs, you can go back and forth. Will it be James Whittington? I think it's 1A, 1B, kind of two-headed monster, play the hot hand as the season goes along, assuming Whittington comes back healthy off of his injury. But I wonder how many receivers they're going to employ this year in the offense. Because last year, it was pretty solidly 4. You had Troy Franklin, Tez Johnson, Trayshawn Holden, Gary Bryant Jr. 3 of those guys are back. Evan Stewart comes in via Texas A&M. That's someone who's a plug-and-play starter, probably your number one target on the outside. Does that mean that Jurion Dickey and Kyler Casper are going to spend a second season in a reserve role where they just won't see the field at all? Could they move up the depth chart? I think that's the most intriguing thing offensively. But let me know what you all think in the YouTube comments, or hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter, at @McLaughlinCFB or @LockedOnDucks. Always love engaging with you all and getting your thoughts. Many, many things to discuss, including Oregon's defensive coordinator. How should we feel about Tosh Lupoi right now? Very hotly contested name in some corners for Oregon fans. Here's something that's not hotly contested. Amazon Fire TV is great because Fire TV is your destination for sports. From live games to highlights to in-depth analysis, Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball, which I'm very excited for as a Mariners fan, or the college basketball tournament, which I love as a sports fan, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and conferences as well. March Madness, NBA, MLB, and lots more, not to mention news, entertainment, gaming, travel, and cooking videos as well. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. This episode of Locked On Ducks also brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. You shouldn't have to worry when buying tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Game Time's the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can see all-in views from your seat before you buy, so you know what to expect when you arrive. You get all-in prices, so they show your total up front, and you can buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Guaranteed. I need a second segment sip today, as always. I always enjoy your mailbag questions. As I said, if you want priority access, go join the flock over at Subtext. Free 14-day trial. Then it's just $5 a month. You get all sorts of perks over there. Or you can do it the old-fashioned and free way forever and always. YouTube comments or hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter. This question from Alexi. Hi, Spencer. Love the podcast. Appreciate you. I don't know why I threw up the double deuces there. I like the vibes. I like when people enjoy the show. It is something that I very much enjoy hearing from all of you. I wanted to get your opinion on the Ducks defensive coordinator, Tosh Lupoi. Do you think he's a good defensive coach, or would looking into a new defensive coordinator be something the Ducks should look into? Thanks. So, Tosh Lupoi has been an often discussed coach for Oregon. Now, when he came to the Ducks, it had been several years, I think it was 4 or 5, since he had last been a defensive coordinator. The last defensive coordinator position that he had was at Alabama, and the Crimson Tide and Nick Saban, then the head coach of the Crimson Tide. Weird thing to say that, isn't it? Anyway, your friendly reminder that Dan Lanning wanted to stay at Oregon instead of going to Alabama, but hey, that's just a quick side note there. Nick Saban, who is an excellent football mind, I think we all agree, relieved Tosh Lupoi of his play calling duties because it was not going particularly well. Then you had Lupoi come in on Dan Lanning's staff in 2022, and the defense fell short of expectations, struggled in many ways, and Oregon did kind of bring in a new defensive coordinator. Now, the title leads everyone to believe perhaps that, he's just another person on staff, or he's maybe not the number one guy, but Chris Hampton came over from Tulane, and Hampton has reportedly, according to Matt Zenitz of 24/7, turned down this offseason other Power 5 defensive coordinator offers to stay at Oregon. Now, a guy who came over from the Green Wave that had their best season ever, 12 wins, Cotton Bowl champions over USC. A guy who was a defensive architect for that team that had a really good defensive year and comes over to Oregon, my suspicion has always been he is the guy actually calling plays more than Lupoi. Now, it is a collaborative team effort. We all saw in Ducks versus them this year the way that coaches talk to one another on the headset, right? I think you saw it a lot with the offensive staff, but certainly everyone is communicating. Everyone is talking, and Hampton is another voice in that room. I don't think that Hampton would stay at Oregon if he didn't have a heavy level involvement in Oregon's defensive play calls. Now, he's the co-defensive coordinator and now the defensive backs coach with Demetrius Martin off to Michigan State, his alma mater, and Lupoi is still the co-defensive coordinator for the Ducks. Do I think Tosh Lupoi is a good defensive mind? In that particular area, the evidence suggests he's not great. That doesn't make him a poor defensive coach because the defensive line has been quite good for Oregon over the last couple of seasons. They had their struggles in 2022, but it was their first year, and they have done a great job catering to what Lupoi is really on staff to do, and that is recruit. Everywhere this guy has been, ever. You go back to his time at Cal. I think he was on staff at Washington at one point. He recruited guys like Shaq Thompson up to the Huskies. I think he recruited Keenan Allen to Cal, Najee Harris to Alabama. Like, he is a big time recruiter. And it turns out that it's hard to be a great defensive coach if you don't have great players. The better players you have, the easier it is. But is Lupoi a brilliant defensive mind? No, I don't think so. And that's why he doesn't get talked about when head coaching vacancies come up. It's clearly not something that he desires, because I've never seen his name on a short list. I never see it get tweeted out. And he's been in college football for a long time, and he can really recruit. And remember, in 2019, Oregon won the Rose Bowl because they just recruited better players than everybody else. Because we all know that Mario Cristobal and Marcus Arroyo, the brain trust offensively, were not out scheming anybody. They were just, we have better players. Kayvon Thibodeau's on defense. The secondary's awesome. And Justin Herbert's a quarterback. That's how Oregon won a Pac-12 championship. And that's fine. That's the way you can do it. But Marcus Arroyo got a head coaching opportunity at UNLV. It wasn't because he was seen as a cutting-edge, innovative offensive coach. It is because he could really, really recruit. He could recruit, and he'd been at Oregon. He'd had success. Well, Tosh Lupoi's had success the last couple of years. He can really recruit. And I don't think he has the desire to be the head coach, because some guys just aren't wired like that, first of all. But second of all, I don't know that his schematics and his play calling and his defensive, kind of X's and O's stuff, it is among the best in all of the coordinator community. So I think that he is a very good guy to have on staff. You look at this defensive line recruiting that Oregon's had over the last couple of years, it's been elite. It continues. Every time Brian Smith is on this show, our Locked On Recruiting Insider, he marvels at how Oregon recruits. Says, look, it's SEC style, and he has that SEC background, so he knows what he's looking for. And he's got connections. He knows how to talk to kids and build relationships and everything like that, and he seems like a really good guy. Whenever I see him interview, he just seems like he's a very nice, down-to-earth sort of dude. But he is someone who players clearly like to play for. I mean, look at the number of players that were blue-chip prospects in 2023 that are waiting it out. I know it's along the defensive line, and you don't typically come in and play as a true freshman, but 3 guys did. They were all at the edge spot, not on the interior. But the fact that none of those defensive linemen that were blue chip guys, Tavita Pamee transferred to Oregon State. He was a 3-star. Not that he doesn't have potential, but he was not as highly coveted of a recruit. I think guys like playing for Dan Lanning and Tosh Lupoi as well, and of course Chris Hampton, you have to put into that fold too. But I think that Lupoi's greatest strengths are culture and recruiting, more so than defensive play calling and scheme and X's and O's. I don't think that is where he thrives. The evidence suggests that it is not. It doesn't mean he's poor. Like, clearly, if you're going to be, I've seen poor, okay? Oregon's defense in 2022, before Chris Hampton arrived, it was not good. But it wasn't anything near the worst defense we've ever seen at Oregon. So that was 2016. That defense with Brady Hoke there, that was just a train wreck. And that's a combination of personnel and scheme and practice and preparation and everything in the sort. So I think Lupoi has his strengths and weaknesses. I think Dan Lanning recognized that after 2022, and that's why he brought Chris Hampton in. And if Hampton were to ever get, a defensive coordinator job elsewhere, I'd be most curious to see if Lanning goes back to Lupoi as the play caller. And Lanning is clearly not going to call plays. When he first came over from Georgia, I said here on the show that I wanted him to. I would never be opposed if Hampton were to leave and Lanning were to call the plays, but you just don't see that very often in college football for a reason. And I don't think Lanning's ever going to do that because it's not what he knows. It's not what he learned as a coach, right? He learned under Kirby Smart. He learned under Nick Saban. Those guys are defensive coaches who come from that side of the ball who could call plays if they wanted to, but they don't. And especially with NIL in the portal, there are just too many responsibilities there. So I think Lupoi is fine, but I think he is at his best, which he was a season ago with a really, really good Oregon defense, when he's got coaches around him that support what he does not do as well, which is specifically being the play caller there. But I don't think he's, the village idiot or anything, or some absolute bum of a defensive coach. But do I think that he could go toe-to-toe in a play calling game in the cat and mouse of, offensive defensive coordinators with the best coordinators in the country? No, probably not. History suggests that that is not the case. But I like having him on staff because he recruits really, really well. How do we feel about Dana Altman? Oregon is the 4th seed going into the Pac-12 tournament. They've won 20 games again. Well, I can tell you how Dana Altman feels about Dana Altman. I'll do that after I tell you about how I feel at LinkedIn, which is strong in a positive sense. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, that's billion with a B, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many qualified candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. That's why 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So Dana Altman has no intention of leaving Oregon unless he is asked or forced to do so. I am once again reserving complete and total final judgment until I see all of Oregon's season play out. It was a nail-biting win on Saturday. I was calling a Southern Utah game, so I missed a chunk of it, but caught the end, and Oregon held on. There was a good look from the corner for the win. It missed, and Oregon beat Utah 66-65. Utah covered the 3.5-point spread, though, because Vegas is goated, but that's just the way the cookie crumbles. So Oregon ends the regular season 20-11, and Dana Altman has never won fewer than 20 games in his career at Oregon, which is a remarkable achievement. He is flying up every year the all-time wins list in college basketball. He will be in the Hall of Fame whether he ever wins a national championship at Oregon or not. The guy has just won a lot of basketball games. So a lot of fans who support the program, as I do, have been frustrated with Dana Altman's teams the last couple of years. And I have been in that camp. And coming into this season, I felt that Dana Altman should have to make the tournament or it's time to make a change. After watching this year, I don't think I feel that way. Again, I kind of have to let everything play out and see how my mind and my body react to it before I know for certain what I think. But that's very much where I'm leaning. And the rumors that were kind of flying around for quite a while about Dana Altman potentially retiring, I can assure you are not true. Not just because Dana Altman said, I don't know who starts that stuff, but that's not true, and I'm not going anywhere unless they ask me to, which means, Oregon would have to fire me to get me to leave. I think that speaks to his mindset, number one. But even more so, his post-game pressers last week against Colorado and Utah, it was not a good loss to Colorado. It's a good win against Utah. Not good enough to put Oregon on the bubble. As I said after the Colorado game, Oregon was done as an NCAA tournament at-large team. They have to win 3 games in 8 days to get into the NCAA tournament. They'll play the winner of Arizona State and UCLA. Then they would play, I believe, Arizona in the semifinals if they win that game. And then the 2 or 3 seed will be some combination of Colorado or Washington State, most likely, depending on, somebody could make a run. But there's an automatic berth up for grabs. Maybe the Ducks do it. I've seen them do it before. Not supremely confident that this team is going to find a way to get that done. But after the last 2 games in which Dana Altman said going into it, hey, fans, we need you to come out. We need the support. And there were good, solid crowds at Matthew Knight Arena. And I love seeing that because I'm a huge college basketball fan and I want Oregon basketball to be as good as it can possibly be. Against Colorado, the first thing that Dana Altman was asked about the defense, and he was furious. So not only did he say, as I already mentioned, I'm not going anywhere, but a coach who is checking out of his job or is going to leave it or would want to leave it does not react the way that Dana Altman did to the defensive lapses for a guy who has always hung his hat as a coach on defense. And I'll get to what he said after the Utah game in just a moment, but that initial reaction to the Buffs game, he was livid. He was beyond frustrated. And that's a guy, I think, who still cares. Not frustrated in a way of, I just can't do this anymore. Frustrated in a way of, I know what we need to do. We're not doing it. Guys aren't executing. I'm not coaching well enough. That's not someone to me who wants to leave. That's not someone to me who is about to retire. Then the Utah game comes around. He's asked several questions about the game and can you do this better and can you do that better and everything like that. And I continue to watch KJ Evans and just see so much potential. That guy, that is a 15, 8, and 1-2 blocks a game player waiting to happen once N'Faly Dante leaves, which he has done after the season. Has played his last game at Matthew Knight Arena. By the way, quick word on Dante. That guy plays his butt off. He's missed one shot in the last 2 games, and Altman has said, oh, we got to get him the ball more, And I hear that on the one hand. On the other hand, it's not efficient to throw the ball into a center that can't shoot. But that's a different conversation that I've had before here on the show. Dante plays his butt off every night. Every single night. Doesn't matter what's on the line, and I cannot get enough of that. I cannot get enough of guys that just go out and for the love of the game or to hold on to whatever slim hope remains to salvage the season and get in the NCAA tournament and spoil somebody's at-large opportunity. Dante plays as hard as you can possibly play. So Altman then comes into the Utah post-game presser and he's getting asked a few questions about the game. And then he gets asked something along the lines of, commitment or what does it mean to have had another 20-win season? He then talks for about 8 minutes about the team, about the season, about the struggles and how hard it's been and how he wouldn't push guys hard at practice because he was scared of getting another guy hurt. So then teams weren't ready to play on Saturday. I say teams because he's had to deal with a bunch of different iterations of this Oregon team throughout the year. Typically, Dana Altman teams historically have not played great at the start and they peak towards the end of the year. Well, that can only happen when guys are playing consistently throughout the season, and almost nobody did this year. KJ Evans did, and by the way, Evans, much better player today than he was early in the year. So I think that for Dana Altman, the passion is still there. The desire, the commitment, it's all still there. And to say that he's not capable, I just can't get behind that. I don't know how many coaches in college basketball could have won 20 regular season games with the teams that Oregon put on the court this year. You had a true freshman point guard, Jackson Shellstad, who's very good. You had another true freshman that had to play a big role. Your big men were always out. I mean, one of Biddle or Dante, I think they played like 2 games together this year. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. Bartholomew went out. Zarzuela went out. Just it was ridiculous, the injuries this year. So when you have a coach who is asked a question like that and immediately goes into a prolonged rant about the season and how hard it was and what he should have done better and everything like that, that's not someone who mentally is checked out and retiring. So I think we can put that to bed. And sorry, I clicked that too early for those watching on YouTube. I didn't mean to do that. But I think we're going to see, we'll see what happens in the Pac-12 tournament. But I think we are going to see Dana Altman back as Oregon's coach next year. And as of now, I feel like that is the best thing for the Oregon program. As frustrating as it can be for what is about to be, I'm fully expecting another berth in the NIT. So I get that it's frustrating, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Lastly, Oregon baseball. What a week. A sweep down in Phoenix against GCU. Then they go to Tempe, Pac-12 opener, and after blowing a 4-3 lead in the 8th on Friday, they come back down a run in the top of the 9th, and who would deliver the go-ahead 2-run shot but that man, Jeffrey Hurd. As I tweeted out, Jeffrey Hurd is him. That dude's a hitter. Wasn't even hitting well in the series. I don't think he had his best week at the plate, but he came through when Oregon needed him to. And Bryce Betcher is the best defensive center fielder I can remember Oregon having. And granted, the program and my following of it and fandom of it has been relatively new, but he catches everything, everywhere, all the time. Jacob Walsh is raking. He had, I think, 2 more homers in the ASU series, and Oregon came back to win on Sunday. They were down 1-0 early, came back to win 8-5, and the Ducks went 4-1 on a 5-game road trip against a Pac-12 opponent and the 3-time defending WAC champions. I'll take that every single day of the week. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.